Everyone, welcome back to this with another video. Today we're looking at exposure value, and this tends to be applicable to leaf shuttered cameras, not focal plane shuttered cameras. That sort of came later. This was designed or thought about in the 50s by a German guy called Deckel, and the basic idea behind it is that you group your shutter speeds and your apertures together and you call it an EV value. So for example, this is the meter on the Yashica Minister 3. So you set your ASA with this dial here. You can see our ASA is set, and then you read the light with the meter. This light is really dim. Let me grab the torch. It's winter time. Today's the day the clocks go backwards. So there you can see it reads the amount of light. And there's a scale on the top. So once you've set your ASA, you look at the scale and we'll say that's 15. So that is an EV value. It's not a shutter speed or an aperture. It is a combination or a collection of shutter speeds and apertures that will give you the same exposure. So 15, for example, is the number this time. So what you would do is on this front section here, you would set this to 15, which is there. Now what it will do is it will give you a selection of shutter speeds and apertures. So this is a 500th at f8. You can't change the aperture directly, but if I change it to 250, it goes to 11. Change it to 125th, it goes to 16. The 60th at f22, and it can't go any more than that because 22 is as far as it can go. You cannot get all the shutter speeds and all the apertures without messing about with the EV scale. It can be a little bit confusing for newcomers to this type of camera that just want to set the shutter speed and the aperture. This was designed to make it easier for people because all of these are the same value in terms of exposure. So you can decide I want to stop the action, so I'm going to use a 500th. So 500th, if that's on 15, would be f4. But if I wanted more depth of field, if I wanted to shoot at f11, I would have to be shooting then at a 30th. So it takes a lot of the complications and things out of it. This was the idea behind it, was to make it easier for people to understand exposure by giving them one number to think about rather than having to think about shutter speed and aperture, etc. So this is the aperture on this particular camera. There's no way of adjusting it apart from adjusting this EV scale. Now obviously if your EV is quite low, say at 4, then again it opens up, it allows you more choice in the shutter speeds and probably more choice in the apertures. This camera, they all tend to move together with this one. So they're interlocked. It's all mechanical because these are mechanical cameras. So this is saying, is that 2 seconds or half a second? Half a second at 2.8. It won't allow you to go any further than that, but you can probably go down to a second. But it's just saying wide open. Let's try something about 10 and see what choices it gives us then. So it won't allow, it will allow us to go any faster than that. You can see it's quite fiddly because this scale keeps moving. It is quite fiddly. But that's the idea, is that you set the EV value that you read off of the scale, and then you can choose the shutter speed. So EV8, 15 to f4. You go to an 8th. You can see how the aperture changes. It's an idea that kind of worked in its day, I presume, but yeah, it makes these cameras a little bit more complicated to use. You just have to set the EV value first that you read from the scale up here, and then you can adjust the shutter speed and it will link the aperture to it. So that's how it works on the Yashica Minister 3. So there's no direct way of setting the aperture on that camera. and the shutter speed and the aperture are locked together, so you can't really do a lot with that one. This is a Zeiss icon. I can't remember exactly which model this is. Same thing, has a light meter in it with a little cover, selenium cell. So the same thing, when you shine a light in it, the needle moves about. You set your ASA, you line up your needle, and it will give you an EV value on the outside scale there. You can see this has got an EV value of 9. So exactly the same thing with this. You have to set your EV value, which on these I think is underneath. There's your EV values. So there's a button somewhere so you can turn the thing. What's your flash thing? There we go. The idea is that you can just set this, and then you don't have to worry about shutter speeds and apertures. So you set this to 9 in this case, and then that's giving you the combination of shutter speeds and apertures. So that's saying a 15th at 5.6, a 30th at f4, a 60th at 3.5, and that just shows you that combination of numbers. So again, here you can choose your shutter speed or your aperture. I think on this one, yes, you can unlock it. On some cameras you can unlock the coupling to give you total control over it. But yeah, you can see the idea behind it. You just have to find the one number off the scale, set the one number on the camera somewhere, and then that will give you the two corresponding shutter speeds and apertures, and give you a selection of them. Now this is a Rollei cord. This is a Rollei cord 5, another leaf shuttered camera, and this has the same kind of system on it, although on these they are interchangeable. You can see here's the EV numbers here, look. And yeah, this has a similar system, but you can separate them one from the other, and on this side you can see the shutter speed. So this is your shutter speed selection here, and as you change the shutter speed you can see the aperture changing. So this has a similar system on it as well. So this scale here is your EV values. So you can see there's your EVs there, and these are locked together as well, but you can change them independently on this as well. So you can set the aperture, set the shutter speed, or you can have them locked together. So there's a quick introduction to EVs. In particular, we're talking about the Yashica Minister, because that was the camera the guy was having trouble with. And yeah, what you want to do is get probably use another light meter just to check the accuracy. But you see, this one shows EV on it, so it gives you an EV value. So if you say EV 10, and this is at 400 ASA, these are your values, and you'll see, say a 30th at 5.6 is the same as a 60th at f4. It's all to do with stops, so it just allows you to choose a range of shutter speeds and apertures for a particular light value. And again, this is a Leningrad Russian light meter. The same thing, you've got a scale down here that you can read. You can read your EVs off. So again, you can read your EV. So if your EV was 15, you set the scale to 15, and then you could read off 2000 at 5.6, 1000 at f8, etc. Once you get the idea behind stops and everything being double or half, then you've won the battle with the exposure value system. But yeah, you'll come across these cameras and they're a little bit confusing because there's no real way to adjust the aperture, and that's because they work on the EV system. So all they give you on this scale is an EV value that you set on this front scale here. Choose your shutter speed, either because you want a fast or slow shutter speed, or because you want a wide aperture for narrow depth of field, or you want a very small aperture, a high f number for increased depth of field. But obviously you're going to have a slower shutter speed. I hope that kind of gives you a bit of an introduction to it. Any questions, queries, comments, anything I've missed, please let me know down below. And hope you're having a great weekend, and don't forget the clocks go back tonight so you get an extra hour in bed. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and look forward to seeing you in the next one.